So thank you all for joining today. This is the second imYEG webinar episode in the series. We've done Finance 101 with Scott Reed, and this one is Branding 101. I think I've met everyone on this call, but my name is Zeinab Elbarrad. I'm a business associate with Brass Dome. I also help out with many of the innovations, and that's how I met most of you. And yeah, my background is in marketing and political science and a little bit of design thinking as well. So I'll be covering branding for you today, some basic ideas for branding for startups. And throughout the call, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to interrupt, raise your hand, add it to the chat. We'll happily try and answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I'll look it up and I can get you an educated answer afterwards as well. So to start, so today we'll be covering a couple of topics, starting off with the question of what branding is, some ideas or examples of powerful brands, whether branding is just a logo, why all of this matters, and what to do if you don't have a brand. And then we'll go over some more examples of how big brands weren't born big, and we'll end it up with some time for questions as well. Now, I think we'll have plenty of time at the end, but again, throughout the presentation, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to interject. So let's get, so what is branding? So the word brand comes from the German word for burn. Historically, the term is derived from the practice of farmers branding their cattle so that they can identify animals that they own. Of course, this is still done today, but our topic is about a different type of branding, but this is the historical context from where it originates from. Now, in marketing, brands allow us to identify how a product or service belongs to a specific company. Companies burn an image into their brand or service or material so that people can identify that it belongs to them. And it also allows brands to burn an image into a consumer's mind about the attributes that this brand has. The official definition by the American Marketing Association is that a brand name is a design, term, a symbol, name, or any other feature that identifies one seller's goods or services as distinct from other sellers in the marketplace. So some examples of powerful brands. Now, brands that are very easily identified by consumers become powerful because even without seeing the name or the product, you're able to know which company this is and the products it offers. So I think everyone on the call will probably be able to say that these logos belong to Pepsi, Mercedes, Apple, McDonald's, and Windows. And in the cases where the logo, or yeah, basically the logo, I won't say brand, the logo is becoming this key identifier. It allows consumers to correctly also attribute some attributes to them. So for example, if someone says, or if someone sees the logo of Mercedes, they might think of a good quality German car. So you didn't see the name of the company, you only saw the logo, but you were also able to identify some of these attributes that it has ingrained over the years. So even more powerful brands. Now I have a couple of examples here, not to say that they're more powerful than the ones in the previous slide, but they are partial logos. And we can do this as an experiment where I'll show you a partial logo and I will ask everyone on the call if they would like to participate to try and guess which logo this is. Now there is no prize, but it's just for fun. So we'll start off with the first one and I will give you a second. And if you want to chime in, go ahead. If not, and BDV team, if you would like to participate as well, you can.
Maybe it's a bad sign that I know this one, but Starbucks.
Thank you, Sean. That is correct. Yes. Okay, so we'll try another one. How about this one? Anyone?
Here.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, that one.
Heinz.
Yes.
Sesame Street.
Absolutely.
Lego.
Yes. I thought this one was hard. I don't know why. Well, just an example of how brands in some cases are so powerful. Their logos, even if it's only a shape or a color put together, we're still able to correctly identify the name of the company to that and connect it to that logo. It can also be other things. So this is basically what you all guessed right now. So I'm going to, I think I'm already sharing my sound. It can also be a sound that we're able to identify. So I'm going to play this sound and hopefully it works. And you can try and guess which company this belongs to. It's not playing. Okay, let's try again. Maybe I need to play from here. Any guesses?
I know what it is, but I want someone else to guess.
I'll play it one more time.
I think in the spirit of me needing to lose weight, I'll just say, is that McDonald's?
I'm loving it.
It's McDonald's, yes. Yes. So again, here you have something that is not a logo, but that is a trademark sound that people can identify simply by hearing this little chime. So is branding just a logo? No, obviously it's much, much more. We just thought it could be even a sound, but it's even more than that. As the earlier definition that we looked at suggests, branding includes any other feature that identifies one seller's product or service as distinct from another. So it doesn't have to be something visual or it doesn't have to be sound. When you look at a brand strategy dives into much, much more than just the visual identity. And we won't have the time to go over all of these different elements. But generally speaking, if a brand strategy is made out of three main elements, the brand core, the positioning, and the persona, then these subcategories would be worth probably exploring a little bit more. So for example, the purpose, vision, and value. So the purpose being the core reason why you're running your business. The vision, which would be about informing your long-term direction of your business. And then the values are about the forces that drive your business forward. So all of these are part of the brand core and part of the brand strategy. In terms of positioning, you'll have things like looking at your audience, your market, and the goals of your branding strategy. So audience being who you are serving with your brand. Market is the gap that you're filling with this unique proposition that you're offering. And the goals being how you want to achieve brand awareness and how you're going to get there. And finally, brand persona is about almost humanizing the brand. So you're giving it a personality, a voice, and then a tagline to summarize it. So you might think of a brand as having a funny or serious or reliable personality. So you're giving it almost like a human, you're humanizing it by doing that. You can also give it a voice. So one brand might be formal and professional, and the other one might be more informal and friendly. And then the tagline being a short statement that summarizes what you do, and it summarizes this voice and personality in it. So this is just a very broad overview of the brand strategy. Now, why does this all matter? Why does it all matter? It's because of brand equity. Now, brand equity, and this is a definition again, the textbook definition refers to the value premium that a company that can add to its product or service in comparison to an equivalent brand or no-name brand. So we see this everywhere we go, really. One example is in the grocery store. So if you look at these two microwave popcorns, both packages have the same weight, they have the same number of packs, but you see that there's a massive difference in price. It's almost double. And really, it's a commodity. It's just popcorn, probably some sort of fat, salt, and put into a bag. But because this brand was able to create perceptions, it's able to sell its product at a higher price, and consumers are buying it because that's why they're on the market. So that's just an example of brand equity here. Now we've established that brands are more than logos. We can say that it's an identifier, a promise, an asset, set of perception, and a mind share. And to go through these elements, we will be using FedEx as kind of the case example. So identifier, as we talked about earlier, it's the visual aspect that allows you to identify the brand. So if you see the FedEx logo on a van or on an airplane, on a package, you know that the service provider here is FedEx. So that's kind of straightforward. A promise is about it's the promise that a company makes to its consumers through its brand. So FedEx's tagline is a world on time, and its promise is when it absolutely positively has to be there overnight. So what they're doing is they're promising people that they will be on time, they're fast, they're reliable. So what FedEx is doing is ingraining the idea of punctuality in the consumer's mind. If I thought this image was a clever take on what they were doing, it's an image of a van, a FedEx van, and it was painted in such a way to show it racing with a competitor. Now, we can also take a pause here. If anyone can guess what the competitor van is in this case, I know it might be DHL, absolutely, yes, thank you. So it is DHL. So again, it's an example of how we didn't see the logo, we didn't see the name, but simply by seeing the yellow and the red, in the context of vans delivering things, we thought about DHL. So what they're saying is we're better than DHL, we're faster. And assets, so that was what we just talked about. It's the equity, the additional value that they can bring and that they can charge customers as well. So they've created a promise that it said we're going to be on time, and they also delivered on it. And as a result, they're able to charge people more. So let's say if you want to ship something with Canada Post versus FedEx, it might be cheaper to do it with Canada Post, but someone might choose FedEx because they have these ideas about how they're reliable and they justify the price because of that. Now, the set of perceptions refers to the idea that when someone mentions the word FedEx, your brain automatically thinks about fast and reliable. I don't know, like with me, when someone mentions FedEx, I remember the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks and how it was always about time and how like it had to happen quickly. So that was ingrained in my mind. So now I think FedEx is fast. A mind share is when, as a result of all of these aspects, a brand is able to take on part of your mind almost. So at this stage of branding, when someone even mentions the word shipping something, someone might immediately think of FedEx. Oh, I'll FedEx it over. Another example of that would be if someone says, I will Xerox this document, as in I'll copy it or I'll print it. So you're using the name of the brand as a verb. Another one being Kleenex. So Kleenex has taken on this mind share in our heads that it's become part of the regular vocabulary. So we might be thinking, I don't have a brand as a startup. What should I do? So a couple of steps or points I'll cover here, and then we'll go over each one of them in more detail. But to start off, establish a unique value proposition. Next step, think of your tone and the name that conveys your uniqueness. Create a simple visual identity, be consistent with it, and once you're established, create your real brand, so to say. So we'll dive into each one of those points. So establish your unique value proposition. It's important to understand how you're providing something that no other competitor is providing. Who are your customers and what value are you bringing to them? It's important to be able to answer those questions. The unique value proposition is basically a statement that explains the benefits that your product or service offers and how it will address the customer needs, as well as how it's different from your competitors. And to be able to create an effective unique value proposition, you need to better understand your customer first. So you will have to think about what your customer does, their gains and pains, and how your product, on the other hand, helps them out with these tasks or jobs, and how you are able to relieve their pains and increase their gains. A great resource for that would be Strategizer, and I think many of you might have already heard about it, but it does offer this this value proposition canvas template where you can fill in the information and be able to see things visually in front of you. And then from there, develop a statement that accurately represents your value proposition. Next up, think of the tone and name that conveys the uniqueness that you were able to derive from the value proposition exercise. So coming up with a name can be very challenging, but some tips. Start with a brain dump. So that's basically setting a timer for 3-5 minutes. You can repeat the exercise and just writing down as many words or phrases that you can think of when you think of what you offer. So that will inform your tone as well as the name potentially. And while you do that, you might be thinking, well, what will a consumer think of my brand when they think or when they see it? So once you have that, you want to think about the quantity of the words as opposed to the quality at this stage, because you really want to write down as many ideas as you can. And then from there, you can filter it out. Once you have an idea about what name you will want to pursue, you should do a corporate and trademark search to ensure that it is not being used by a competitor or by someone in a different industry so that you can differentiate yourself from them and then also avoid legal troubles. In addition to that, you should Google your brand name, the potential brand name. So it's one thing to look up the trademark and making sure that the name isn't incorporated, but it's another thing to also make sure that your name isn't similar to another brand so that people don't confuse you with someone else. And then also make it simple and easier to remember. Do not make your name hard to pronounce or spell, because if it's hard to pronounce, the receiver of the information may not be able to remember what it was and search you up later. And if it is hard to spell, well, if it's easy to pronounce, but it's spelled in a funny way, it might be hard to find you. So just find a way to make sure that it's easy to find you. It's a name that is simple, it's easy to remember, easy to spell, easy to pronounce. Next up, create a simple visual identity, which would include your logo, the color, fonts, other visual aspects. You really don't have to create an elaborate brand image at this stage. You're still growing and understanding your market, and it is totally understandable that you might not have an intricate logo or brand package. So do not spend too much money trying to develop the perfect logo. It will come later. There are many free online resources available as well to develop a simple logo. And to make things even easier, you might go with a word mark as opposed to a logo. So some very big companies use word marks. So as you see here, the examples, I mean, Panasonic is really just the word spelled out. Mobile did an extra step by changing the color of one letter, but in these examples, it's just a very, very simple logo, but you're still able to identify it. And that brings us to the idea of being consistent. While your logo might be very simple, it's important to keep consistency in your visual material. This makes your audience easily identify your product, service, your design, your visual material if you have anything that you share with them. And it also reflects professionalism and attention to detail. So you can create a simple brand guide to help you out with that. It can include several documents. So things like your logo, how it should be used, the fonts, the colors, including their codes. And if you're able to create themes and templates to use for your PowerPoint and Word documents, that would be very helpful too. It makes things easier as well, so that in the future, when you create a new document, you don't have to worry about making sure it matches your brand guideline. It already exists. You can create your own templates and themes, or you can find free ones online as well. There's many resources available. And I have a couple of ideas for resources here. And again, there's many, many more. This is just a suggestion. So with color palettes, for example, I know it's for a non-designer, it's definitely very hard to make sure that a color works with another one. So there are AI-powered tools online like Coolors, for example. It generates colors for you. You're able to lock a color and make it generate other colors that work with it. And it just makes things easier for the user. FontJoy is another option to find different font pairings. So again, AI generated makes it easy. And some free presentation templates. SlidesGo is an option. There's, again, many, many more but that was one option. I believe there's a limit on how many you can download per day with them, but just make sure you use attribution correctly, and it should be fine. Many people use templates. There's so many out there now that you can find a unique one probably, and you can always make little changes to it as well. And once you're established, you can create your real brand. So always remember that you're still at the very, very early stages of starting up your company. When you're more established later on, you will have a deeper understanding of your market and your consumer and how to best position your product or service. So it is okay to change it later. You do not have to spend any of your valuable resources right now developing an intricate visual brand, because you will likely evolve and change anyways. And it is more valuable to focus on the intangibles of the brand now. So things like the value that you offer, the messaging that you want to convey to the consumer, versus creating tangibles such as a logo or a color scheme. So next up, some examples of brands that weren't born big. So I have a couple of examples to show you some logos that started out looking very different from what they are today. But again, it gives you an idea of how things change. So I'm covering up this logo because the name is in it, but I'll give you a moment if you can guess which logo or which company, sorry, this logo belongs to. I didn't know, so if it Hope, well, it's a good guess. Okay, I'm gonna just let you guys know. It's Apple. And the only thing common with the current Apple logo is the apple in the tree over Newton's head. But yeah, that was their first logo in 1976. I think this logo is probably the one that people would think as being the first one, the colorful one, but that was in 1977. So it took them a year and then they decided to change it. And obviously since then they've stuck to the same idea. They've made design changes to reflect the trends of the times, but they stuck to the same idea. But just shows you how different the change can be and how it's totally okay to make those changes, even with the biggest companies out there. Okay, another one, this one is hard, I think. I mean, this is from 1865. So it's a harder one. Okay, I won't ask you guys, it's Nokia. So in 1865, they were a pulp mill initially, and eventually they became a rubber and cable company. 100 years later, they changed their company logo to this logo here. And then 1978, they introduced this logo. So again, it started off as something completely different. And obviously they were also in a completely different market. And then they moved on to a new market, new logo, completely new look. And then we have one, I don't really need to hype that one. It's obvious, it's Facebook. Initially it was the Facebook, then it was Facebook, and now it's Meta. So not only can you change the design or the logo, you might change the name as well. Again, it's totally acceptable and understandable. As companies change and grow, they might change their names and logos as well. Another example very close to home, this webinar turned out to be very timely because we just introduced a new logo. So initially, this was the logo that we had. This was the updated logo that many of you are familiar with. And this is the newest one that we just released yesterday. So again, example of how you can change your brand. It is understandable and totally fine as you establish your company and you understand your customers better and you understand what you offer and how you can best communicate that to your consumers. Now, finally, I have a couple of additional resources that might be helpful for you. I will send this out to everyone as well so that you can click on them, but a brand workshop for startups, a guide to creating your unique selling proposition. Again, that in addition to the strategizer template, a value proposition worksheet, create the actual statement, and then some ideas about naming your business and how to come up with that. So this is the conclusion of the official presentation. Now I'll give everyone the chance to ask questions again. I'll try my best to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I'll research it and I will come back to you, but that's it. Thank you all.
Thanks, Zeinab. That's very useful information. I'm going to start the ball rolling with a question or two, but when we're talking to startups, there's always a question as to the costs involved to rebrand, and maybe some easy first steps as a startup to get them along that path without a lot of cash to be able to hire somebody to come in as a marketing agency. So what kind of costs are involved to start a rebrand, and what are some steps like startups can do to get the ball rolling in an inexpensive, easy way?
Thank you, Chris. Yes, so definitely at the very early stages, you do not have to spend a lot of money. A lot of people take things in their own hands and try to make their own logo, and that turns out in many cases very well. Others who would like to maybe hire someone, they can look into hiring students in the design faculty. They might be looking for an opportunity. There's online hiring options as well. So it can be a very small budget. I think the most important thing, and that falls in the hands of the innovator or startup, entrepreneur, is to come up with the strategy that goes behind the brand. So the messaging, who the consumer is, how you want to address them, what message you want to convey to them. And from there, you'll have a very good understanding of what you can envision and talk to a designer, have them develop something for you. Or again, if you want to take it in your own hands, it could work out as well. So I would say really the budget can be anywhere from zero to, when you're a large company, to millions, but it just depends on where you are at the moment. And when you're at the very early stages, I think it's best to make sure that these resources are being used for things that are vital for your growth. Not to say that branding and marketing isn't, but there are tools available for you to do things on your own or on a very low budget.
So Zeinab, you had mentioned that we have rebranded recently, Brass Dome. We've gone from our globe logo that we created for a certain reason to a much easier, simple one. And you know all the reasons behind it, but we really like the original logo and had a tough time changing it because people start to recognize it, but it's a transition to newer and fresher. So how do you know when you have the right logo or the right brand? Do companies typically rebrand? Is that a normal thing that Brass Dome is going through right now? So how do you know when you have the right brand, and at what point in time would you consider rebranding?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes. So I would say that you will likely find out that you're at the right brand when you get the right feedback from your consumers. You find that the goals that you have set through your branding strategy are being met. So people are responding to your brand in a positive way. They are attributing you to certain attributes that you want them to recognize. They are recognizing your brand. And I think that becomes a bit challenging. So when you're saying that when we change the brand, so what happens to the consumer has become very familiar with the original one. And in that case, I think, first of all, over time, design trends change, and as a result, logos might change as well. But if you're able to communicate the change very well with your customer group, that could make it easier for the audience to recognize you now with the new brand. So just making sure that, hey, this is our new look. This is who we are now. We're still the same company, but we changed how the visual part of the brand. So knowing when you have the right brand might change over time, because as we've seen with these examples, at one moment in time, they thought that the Apple III and Newton was a great idea, but obviously over time, it just didn't work out for them. And they changed to a colorful one in the case of Apple. And then later on, design trends changed. So they went with a new trend, but people are still able to say, oh, this is Apple's logo. So it can change over time because trends change, and it also changes because the consumer changes. So what was in 1970 is probably no longer in today. So changes have to happen. I'm not sure if that answers it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I see Robin has posted a question on the chat. Is there an easy way to do a trademark search? I see the Government of Canada webpage, but that is all. Or
Yes.
is that all?
I'm trying to remember it's nuance search. So that's where you do your to make sure that the name isn't incorporated, and like in Alberta, and I think you can do it across Canada as well. I'm gonna find a specific place to do it. I know that oftentimes you might want to speak to like a lawyer to make sure that it's okay to use a name that, yes, thank you, nuance, thanks. To make sure that the name isn't taken or that it's similar to some other company. So yeah, if that helps. But then also the Googling, if that's another thing. So even though the name might not exist, if it's very similar to someone else, it might be confusing to the audience.
Other questions? Salman, you have a question?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out if my camera is on or not. Thanks for the presentation, Zeinab. It was a great presentation. Just a quick question. Could you comment on the role of color? Is it better to use a colorful brand or it's black and white? The pros and cons of using a color.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good question. I think it's definitely more. I'm not a designer, but I would say there are definitely colors that convey specific meanings and emotions in the brains of people. So I think there's a whole science behind this. So yellow, for example, is like happiness. So if you look at like McDonald's, like it's kind of like this happy feeling. If you look at blue, is often used with like computer companies, a lot of professional companies. It gives this like impression of like professionalism. Green being more often used in obviously more nature-focused companies or things related to the environment. I can find something where it shows the different colors, different logos, and the different emotions or different personality traits of the company, and I think that might be helpful. Black and white, I think, is often used as well. Gold reflects success, absolutely. So we have gold and brass dome. So it's just, there's so many different ways to combine the colors, I think, and they convey so many different meanings depending on the industry and the company. But I'll find that graphic and I will send it as part of this document.
Thanks. And just a quick follow-up question, if I can ask. Is it possible to go back on your brand? You start something new and then you realize that it's not working out? And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially because you're in the startup phase, I think you have this luxury of changing like things around. Maybe you want to still like maintain at least the same name just so that people don't get too confused. But because you're still growing and you're discovering what works and what doesn't work, I think it's acceptable to change things around. And again, like even the biggest brands in the world, they changed their logo entirely and it worked out fine. They're still great. So right. Yes, yeah, no.
Thanks. Sorry, Sean.
No, never apologize. That was a great question. Zeinab, I had one around how to actually figure out if it is working. So, you talked a little bit about, making sure that the branding is resonating with your clients or your customers. And I guess one way to figure that out, pardon me, is if you're doing well and if your business is doing well, then presumably your brand is out there. But is it okay for a company or a startup to just ask, like just do a survey? And if so, what sorts of questions might we want to plug in there? I assume maybe one of the questions is asking, what words come to mind when someone hears your brand, but do you have any other ideas on what a survey might look like just to figure out if the brand is resonating?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean, for this. Yes. So definitely asking your potential customers about their opinions about different options. Like if you prepare, let's say 3 different options and you show it to them, you tell them which one of those resonates the most with what we do. And then maybe even showing it to them and then asking them, what is the first word that comes to mind when you see this and that and the third one? And then taking these answers and looking at whether or not it matches what you want it to be. So that's a great way to almost like crowdsource the idea. You might even involve them in the design process itself. Maybe ask them, what do you think should our visual identity look like? Like just like a focus group, just putting them, like giving them a piece of paper and asking them like, just brainstorm with me. What should it look like? So I think that's the way to go, especially if you're still starting out. That could potentially be a way to go.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Zeinab, I imagine with branding, it's kind of a cart and horse situation, because it's not like you're going to come up with a brand and it's going to be the perfect solution. It's not, it's the brand and the story that you attach and the narrative you attach to your brand. So what I'm seeing with brands right now is things seem to be migrating towards simple, like the Sonys and like just a single word. And then it's about the story they create around that word. So sure, you can pick your colors that might migrate some thinking, but the brands seem to be migrating towards being simpler. But then it's the messaging that they're trying to create around that brand recognition. Is that the trend right now with brands and logos? Is the simpler the better?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think we've been moving from very detailed, like intricate like designs to simpler and simpler versions over the years, reflecting the changes in design trends. Like even like if you look at furniture, it's become more modern. Well, it's like other visual things are also becoming like more modern, like straight lines, like sleek look. Again, the example with Apple, how it started off looking very like detailed, and at the end now it's just literally a couple of shapes put together. And how like in the early 2000s, it was like this 3D version of the logo because it was very common and in to do it that way. Even the interface of Apple, if you remember, like the mail, like all the app icons being like a 3D looking button, and now it would look very odd to see it, but again, it's a reflection of time, and it's definitely becoming simpler and simpler. I don't know. Yes, very good point, Elizabeth. Makes it easier to duplicate the logo. It's easier to transfer onto visual material. Who knows what the next design trend will be, if it will be like, I don't know, neon. But I think it will probably change every decade or so, I think. But I think it's fine that it changes, as long as the messaging stays at the core and the story is consistent. The design elements can come and go, if that answers.
No, that's great. And you know, if we look at the brass dome evolution, when we started the company, we had a logo, a globe logo, because we wanted to portray international. We're beyond the walls of just Edmonton. Our clients have always been outside of Alberta, if not Canada. So we had more of an international focus feel, with a gold color to portray professional and successful. But then we have evolved it now to being along the lines of what seems to be the trends, a simple BDV rather than Brass Dome Ventures. Everybody started knowing us as BDV. We've been around now for several years. So we decided to brand on the BDV in terms of being professional, trustworthy, successful, efficient. So that was the reason for our evolution in our logo, is that I wouldn't say our messaging changed a lot, but our focusing on the message that we wanted to get across has changed.
Absolutely, yes.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. I love brand logos that have a story, and you know, I don't know what your thoughts on that. You know, it's nice when you have, you know, first impression or memorable, but when there's a storyline, you know, that comes with the brand, that you can stand in front of people and say, this is why this logo looks like this because of this and that. What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's an awesome comment. Yes, so a lot of like the big logos do have like stories, and I think that's always interesting, especially because maybe the consumer doesn't realize it first, and then when someone tells it to them, they cannot unsee it almost. So, for example, Amazon, you notice this, like the smiley face, like mouse, it goes from A to Z because they have everything from A to Z. So that was one. Another one, I'll share my screen for a second again to, nope, this one. Okay, let's go back to the FedEx. I think many know the FedEx one, but okay, where was it? Here it is, FedEx. So I don't know if you can see it, but between the E and the X, there is an arrow. And like once you see it, you can't unsee it, I think. So it's because they take things from one place to another in a fast way with the X of express. So that's another one. But definitely, I think when the logo design has a story behind it, it adds so much more value to the visual identity. And then it also reminds people, as like now that you think Amazon A to Z, well, they have everything. So that's another thing to add to the brand image. FedEx, they're fast, they deliver things. There's arrows in the logo. So yes, I agree with you 100%, Dr. Singh.
I never knew about the arrow in FedEx ever before. It's a very memorable logo just because they branded it as such, but never knew about the arrow. That's news. Now I'll never unsee it, like you said.
Yeah.
Honestly, Zainab, I worked with FedEx for years, like years, 7 to 9, and I completely didn't notice the arrow until you showed it to me.
Oh, well, it's a very good design choice, I think. Like they made it in a very nice way. And I think that comes with trial and error. They probably had like 100 logo ideas before they came up with this one. So we only see the end result and we think, oh, that's so, like, that's amazing. I don't know how we were going to come up with it, but it took them a long time and we only see the final version. We think they must be like brand with it, but they're not really. They probably just tried it out many, many times.
Zainab, how important is branding to a company?
I think
Especially
very
startup. We've got several startups on the call here that are just getting their feet underneath them in terms of their venture and they're pushing forward. But how important and why is branding important?
Well, I think it's important because, well, first of all, it allows the startup to understand who they're serving and the difference that they are, like the different option that they're providing to their consumers. So they're providing something unique, and by understanding their branding well, they will be able to better know how to communicate the difference and how their consumers will perceive it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that if you have a very strong brand as you grow, you'll be able to not only differentiate yourself, but again, be able to add a premium to what you offer because you're different, whether you're offering a very superior service, which again, you can convey through that brand. So think of a very like high-end, like Ritz-Carlton. When you think of Ritz-Carlton, you think of very high-end service. And again, it's the immediate thought you have about when you hear the brand, you know that this is what they provide to you. And you are able to justify the price that you're paying because you know you will not get this anywhere else. So it helps, again, with how you communicate your value. And then also it helps you internally understand what your value is and how you can capitalize on it, if that makes sense. But I mean, again, at the beginning, I think the most important part is understanding your customer, understanding what they need and how you are meeting this need by providing your service or good.
Awesome. Any further questions before we let everybody go?
Sorry, one last comment, and I know that that has come up with company names when you're looking. What about geographical sensitivities?
Oh yes, for sure.
For a company name, how would you go about making sure that you're not using a word that would be a swear word in some other language?
Well, yeah, for sure. You need to, like, if you know that you're going to be working in different parts of the world, you need to be very cognizant of this issue of like whether the word can be translated in a way that's good. I think I read once when Kentucky expanded into China. So their tagline is finger licking good. But when they translated it, it turned into, I believe, like you will eat your fingers or something like that. And it was like, that's not like right. Like, why would I eat my finger? So it's the translation, like it got lost in translation. But definitely, if you know that you're expanding somewhere, even at the start, maybe choosing a name that would work in different environments is a good way to go. And then let's say you do expand into somewhere and maybe you have a different name, maybe you make a little adjustment, so it doesn't have to be the exact translation, but something close enough. So yes, very good point. You don't want to tell people to eat their fingers. Yeah. But thank you. Great point, Dr.
All right. Well, thank you, Zeinab. Excellent presentation. Very useful information. Although we live, eat, and sleep this, I still had some takeaways, including the arrow in FedEx. But thank you. Well done. And thank you, participants, for dialing in. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon at the next session or at one of your upcoming mentor sessions. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Zeinab.